Well, Brian, it's been an interesting week here in Boulder. Before we really preview the Utah game, we've got to talk about what's been going on around here. Obviously, 7 News reports late on Monday night that Colorado and Mike McIntyre are going to part ways at the end of the 2018 season. The next day, Mike McIntyre says he has not had any of those type of conversations with Rick George.
Yeah, and I think there's truth to both of those things. I mean, I think that the reporter who gave that report for Channel 7, I think is a trusted reporter around here, Troy Rank. I don't dispute what he reports just because I've seen many things he's done, and I think that he's a reliable reporter. I also believe that there hasn't been conversations yet, and that when Rick George comes out and says, I haven't made a decision yet, I believe that they haven't come down and said, hey, this is what's going to happen. This is, Mike, you're out the end of the year. I believe that hasn't happened. But, I think that as we go in the last 2 games, I've had a lot of fans ask me, well, what if he wins the last 2? Does he save his job? I don't know about that.
Well, to that point there, I have a sense that Rick George knows what he's going to be doing, what he's going to do at this point, don't you?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when he says I haven't made a decision yet, I think he probably hasn't made an announcement yet or made a declaration yet. But I've got to think that in his mind he knows what he wants to do, and maybe he hasn't made a decision because if they look really good in the last 2 games, maybe that'll do something to change his mind. I don't know.
The worst part of this report coming out is I think the timing of it with it being senior week, and you've got 13, 14 guys on scholarship that are going to be playing in their last game. It stinks for them that this has kind of cast a cloud over that.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you would think that the focus should be on the seniors this week being senior week. On the other hand, I think in some ways it takes a little pressure off this team in that the focus is on Mike this week and not on a team that's lost 5 games in a row. And so maybe in some ways maybe it helps this team that they're not under so much pressure. I mean, all the pressure right now is on Mike McIntyre, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Utah comes here, 7-3 football team. I would say driver's seat of the Pac-12 South at this point. Arizona State still has a chance in there as well because they have the tiebreaker against Utah. You mentioned on Monday, this is a Utah team that seems to stub their toe at some point, right. But they're certainly not lacking motivation coming out here with the Pac-12 South on the line.
No, they're not. I wouldn't think they would have lacked that motivation in 2011 either.
Right.
But, I think that, to me, this is the best team that Kyle Whittingham has had in the Pac-12. I think this is the most complete team. Now, losing Tyler Huntley hurts, losing Zach Moss hurts, but I love that defense, the way they play defense. I think that offensive line does a pretty good job, and so I think this is the most complete team he's had.
Jason Shelley takes over quarterback for the injured Huntley, who you mentioned there, and Armand Shine at running back had a huge game against Oregon last week. Yeah. It doesn't sound like their offense has changed any bit with those 2 guys stepping into those roles.
Yeah, if Colorado were to lose Trayvon McMillan, you would really wonder where the rushing yards were going to come from. Well, Armand Shine, we were talking about before we started this, that if people remember, the start of the 2017 season, he was on the Doak Walker Award watch list, had an injury, and Zach Moss took over. So this is not a bad running back, and he goes out there and rushes for 170 yards. Now, I'm not sure I would feel confident in any running back going in and rushing outside of Trayvon McMillan, rushing for 100 yards for Colorado right now. So, I think that Utah just kind of keeps rolling. Now, quarterback, he's a young guy, but I think they've got enough things, offensive line, the running game, to kind of make up for him. And so that's why I think Utah, they can make up for some of those big injuries, even though they are pretty massive injuries.
Utes have the best run defense in the Pac-12. Mike McIntyre talked about the Polynesian connection they have there. Yeah. And, it'd be nice to be USC and have that recruiting base, but it's kind of a secondary great recruiting base in the Pac-12 that doesn't get a lot of credit is those Polynesian kids that seem to play with the mean streak, and Utah has had really solid defensive lines as a result of that.
Yeah, they really have. I mean, every year they play solid defensive line, and you think, oh, well, they lost this guy and this guy, they're not going to be as good this year. Well, then they are. Bradley Anaya is one of the top players on the defensive line. The last couple of years in the Pac-12. I love Chase Hansen, the linebacker. They're just a really solid defense, and they make things tough on a lot of teams.
Special teams, Utah's always solid in that area as well. Kyle Whittingham, I think, has got to be one of the most underrated coaches nationally, especially when you consider all the turnover he's had on his staff over the course of the time they've been in the Pac-12.
Yeah, definitely. The one thing probably why he is underrated is because, as we mentioned before, they do seem to stub their toe at times that they're like, oh, this is the final of the Utah team, and then they have a game or two that you're like, where'd that come from? So maybe that's why. But just year in and year out, I know CU fans will probably not want to admit it, but man, if you could follow the Utah model, this program would be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, they're missing that Polynesian connection in their backyard, though.
They are.
And McIntyre mentioned some of those kids go on missions, and they end up being the oldest football team they play year in and year out.
Yeah.
All right, Brian, what do you think? There's a lot of distractions around here this week. Is this going to galvanize Colorado, or is Utah just too good?
Well, it's sort of like last week in that neither of us could really go out on that limb and pick Colorado, and on paper it just didn't look good. I mean, there's no reason to pick Colorado last week. I think this week is kind of the same thing. I mean, there's not a whole lot of reason to pick them. There's so much kind of turmoil going on, just the injuries, the losing streak, all that stuff. Utah's come in here as arguably the best team in the South. Last week I couldn't pick Washington State. This week I'm going to go with Colorado.
Really?
I'm going to go against convention. I'm going to say because I just feel that this team, there's pride and there's enough in that locker room to rise up and get a win. I've been saying that for 3-4 weeks and they haven't done it yet. But I think this is the week. I think they rise up on senior week. They pull the upset of Utah, and I'll go 31-28.
All right. You're a braver man than me. I can't pick Colorado to win this game. I do think they'll compete. Until last year, this series provided close game after close game.
Yeah.
It's a Folsom Field, senior day. And I do think there is a galvanizing factor that can take place here. But I don't know. I'm in the I'll believe it when I see it mode with this football team officially.
I am too, but I'm going to go out on the limb this week.
All right. Well, again, you're braver than me. I'm going to say Utah wins this game 35-27. This is always the game where they hand out the Buffalo Heart Award. There's some good candidates. It doesn't have to go to a senior, but traditionally it has.
Yeah, I wasn't prepared for that one. I've thought about that earlier this week, and I don't know who that would go to. I guess put me on
Rick Amboa, Juwan Winfrey would be a good.
Put me on the spot here.
Evan Worthington is even an option there.
I think Jay McIntyre would be an option there too. I don't know how much. There's always that thing, the father-son thing, that maybe fans wouldn't vote for Jay in that regard. But I think Jay's been kind of a true warrior, around here. The last 2 years, it's been a pretty slam dunk. We knew it was going to be Phillip last year. We knew it was going to be Cepho 2 years ago. This year, I think there's probably a lot better candidates. I mean, would Evan Worthington be in there? Obviously, he gets suspended for a year, but he's come back and been kind of a warrior for this team as well. So, yeah, I think any of those guys would be a good choice.
I think Rick Gamboa would be a good choice. I think my vote, though, would go to Juwan Winfrey. We've seen that kid work his tail off and face setback after setback, and he's been healthy-ish here down the stretch his senior year, but just really hasn't gotten the payoff for all the work that he's put in over the course of time here.
Yeah, and I think, CU fans, they criticize him a lot because he's not the fastest linebacker out there, but I mean, this is a guy that's been in the lineup for 4 years, and he's made a lot of plays. Maybe not a lot of big-time impact plays, but, he does have a couple, interception or fumble recoveries in his career, and he's been a good player. He's been a solidifying guy in the middle of the field, and you just wish he was a step or two faster, but, you can't change that, and I think for what he is, he's been a pretty good linebacker here.
One thing we do get to vote on at the end of the year is best interview. Not to put you on the spot, but have you put much thought into that?
I have not thought about that once. Boy, I don't know who I'd go with. I mean, it's easy to say this, but Steven's been phenomenal all year.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a guy that stands up, week after week. Another one is Drew Lewis. I think that Drew. They didn't put him out there this last week. I think probably to give him a break, but I think during the first 4 games of that losing streak, he was like the one guy on the defense that was out there standing up in front of the media and talking and taking questions. And I thought that impressed me with him, that he was a guy that would do that. So I've got to give him credit for that. He's been a pretty good interview all year.
I do think Montez wins the award. I might vote for somebody who you didn't mention, Mustafa Johnson, defensive lineman.
Yeah.
Not over the top charismatic, but very intellectual defensive lineman. You can really pick up some good stuff when you talk one-on-one with him. Yeah,
he's been kind of a nice surprise. Like, you never know what to expect with the defensive linemen, because a lot of them are, they're just kind of short answers that they don't want to say a whole lot. They're just kind of grind type of guys. But Mustafa is that way on the field, but off the field, he's fun to talk to and very intelligent guy, and really thinks through the answers, and you do learn a lot about some football when you talk to him.
All right, Colorado, just 2 more chances to try to get bowl eligibility. They're going to try this Saturday afternoon against Utah.